When I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. About the past and about the future.
Welcome back to Draftvice and welcome back football. Oh my God, welcome back. I didn't know you would be back today. Yes, it's here. It's football. I can't believe it. We actually saw a game, a real game without preseason. That's kind of different. It's almost like college football. Yes, Kansas City versus the Houston Texans. And by the way, yes, I am now making a full commitment. I will do daily episodes starting next week. It's kind of weird but anyway, starting right now, guess what, man? This is crazy. It was an interesting game. I wouldn't say great game. I would say interesting game. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about Kansas City and Houston. We're going to talk about the contracts, all the contracts. There was like 10 contracts that were given out in the last couple of weeks to star players. It was like all of a sudden, because there was no extensions done throughout most of the offseason, everybody's doing their extensions right now. So you know what? Since we're all doing extensions, we'll talk a little bit about the extensions, and then we'll touch on some fantasy football. Just talk about a little bit about the waiver wire, if you will, a little bit at the end. Just some guys you might want to keep an eye on, maybe pick up in your league. So right off the bat, Kansas City versus Houston. It was here. It was great. Well, it was okay. It was weird, right? Like, so first off, Houston did get a touchdown early on, and they looked like they were at least going to be competent, and then it kind of looked like they kind of fell apart a little bit. They did a lot of checking down and a lot of, for a bit, I kind of liked what they were doing. Like, it was, because they had all this speed, so, like, it looked like Kansas City was letting them take what they can get. David Johnson looked pretty good. It looked really cool when they had David Johnson and Duke Johnson in there for a little bit. Like, it almost looked like it was like a tale of two play callers for the Texans, right? In the beginning, they were moving the ball downfield, playing a little bit of ball control, utilizing, David Johnson's running, which, like I said, he looked really good. Like, healthy David Johnson's good. It's just how long is he going to stay healthy? And they even did get Duke Johnson in there a bit. Will Fuller was kind of the main receiver for them. Brandon Cooks had some role in there too. But it was really Fuller was the main guy. A little bit of Akins helped. Akins helped get one big move down there. He was actually, like, I kept on hearing things from Texans fan, like, oh, he's a great run after the catch guy. I actually believe it now that I saw that bit. I got to watch more Jordan Akins. Still, like, I watch a lot of tape, but still, it's kind of hard with, fantasy-wise, wouldn't rely on on him. But if Darren Fells ever left the league, I could see a future where Jordan Akins might be a little bit of a fantasy star if became a target for Deshaun Watson. But it was weird because they kind of fell off towards the second quarter. They just weren't moving it anymore. In the second half, my God, the offense just almost, like, it was stagnant. Now, they did get a couple of, they did actually manage to get a couple of more touchdowns to catch up with the Chiefs. Now, the Chiefs, it was the debut of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the first-round pick everybody's talking about. I like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. If you watch this podcast, I was a huge fan of him. He was high on my rookie, on my basically, when he was high in my draft ranks, like, he was one of my favorite players, and all of a sudden he gets drafted by Andy Reid. So I like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but there was clearly an issue here when it came to. So first off, let's go back to their Kansas City's offensive line. It looked almost better than it did last year. Texans' offensive line did not look all that great. Particularly Titus Howard did not look like he knew. Like, he looked like he was, like, microdosing a little bit. Like, he just kind of went out there and he was still a little bit on shrooms. And it was just like, there were moments where, like, either it would be Chris Jones or it would be Frank Clark, and they would just get on him and get past him. So, like, Frank Clark just walked by him. He didn't run, he walked. Like, he trotted. Titus was like, oh, shoot, I was supposed to stop that guy. So, yeah, like, the right tackle has to play better for the Texans. As far as the tackles go for the Chiefs, there was somebody who managed to get by. I don't remember who it was. I think it was actually a linebacker who the linebacker the Texans got in the Jadeveon Clowney trade. He ended up he ended up getting a little bit of Mitchell Schwartz and getting by and getting a sack on Patrick Mahomes. I was, there was some decent play on both ends. There was also some, hiccups, but Overall, not a lot of penalties. A lot of the penalties came. I think almost all the penalties came on the Texans side of the ball. And this makes sense because there's still a lot of moving pieces to the Texans, right? New receivers in that receiving core. The offensive line is okay. Tunsil's good, but there were moments even tonight where Tunsil did not look so good. Titus Howard, man, he looks like he was asleep for quite a bit of it. Was not trying very hard. I did think David Johnson tried really hard. I liked Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I will say this about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. First off, they threw him one pass, and he took a beating tonight. He took a massive, walloping sometimes. And it was almost a little wow, man, this guy's going to get knocked out before it's too late. There were hints of the Kareem Hunt time in Kansas City, if you will, that I was just like, okay, cool. Very good. He does not have the leg drive of Kareem Hunt, not the same way anyway. Very good contact balance, very good player, much quicker than Kareem Hunt. And the reason why I'm going to mention Kareem Hunt is one because he's the former Kansas City Chief running back who debuted on the start of the NFL, and he also just got a contract extension from the Browns, relatively cheap deal, 2-year extension, $13 million, so a little over $13 million. So basically, they're paying $6.5 million a year after this year to keep Kareem Hunt. I mean, that's cheap. When you look at the running backs in the NFL and what the high-end guys are getting, man, that's a good deal. So we'll touch more on the contracts in a little bit. Helaire looked really good, except for when it came to short yardage situations, at least in the way that they were utilizing him. And they didn't really utilize him in the pass game, which I was a little shocked by. This was what he did really well. Now, part of it was, listen, Kansas City got up really high at one point. They were leading this game pretty much from the second quarter on, and they were doing it comfortably. So at some point, they were just why are we going to take all the cards and show everybody what we can do with this kid, right? But my one issue was in the short yardage situations. Now, keep in mind, I get Texans don't have DJ Reader anymore, but they are a pretty solid defensive line. So when it came to short yardage situations, he had a harder time. When it was between the 20s, or even from when it was starting from when they were backed up to their own 10, all the way up to when they got to the 20-yard line, he was very good at getting space and moving. But when it came to short yard situations, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was not performing very well. Sometimes it was also penetration, just guys got through. They're running the ball, and Kelechi Osemele, man, he actually showed up pretty well. It was weird that he went to the Jets last year because he didn't seem to fit what they were doing on the Jets. He fits more of what Kansas City does. So it was a fun game, right? A little bit back to the gameplay a little bit. Sami Watkins made an appearance for a few minutes. Tyreek Hill looked like he was going to be quiet the whole night, and then, Pat Mahomes was like, I got to get my boy Tyreek Hill involved. Travis Kelce showed up. Like I said, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Darrell Williams played quite a bit, so it wasn't like he was totally out of this game either. The Texans, like I said before, Fuller was kind of leading the backfield, leading the receiving core. We saw Cooks. We didn't see Stills and Cobb until the late time of this game. There were hints in the beginning that they were going to utilize a lot more motion and a lot more a lot more interesting things and screen passes. The play calling for the first quarter and a half was really good for the Texans. I actually liked it a lot. Maybe a bit dink and dunky for some people's beliefs, but you know what? When you have that much speed, being able to also just start tearing up the middle of the field, getting David Johnson some work, doing some screen passes, getting some real movement on the offensive side of the ball. I gotta say, I didn't mind what they were doing in the beginning, and then they kind of went away from it, right? They only played one of the two running backs at a time. They took out a lot of the motion. I think they were starting to go we can't have too much motion. Then they kind of went away from doing any kind of screen pass or anything like that for almost the whole, second quarter and into the third quarter. And then there was one screen pass that just went 15 yards, and I'm like, well, yeah, this was working for you. So maybe they learn to get their guys into space more. I liked what I saw from David Johnson. I like, it was a fun game. Football's back, everybody. I had fun. I hope everybody else had fun with it. So let's talk a little bit about the contracts. Right? Oh, by the way, if you don't know, Kansas City won. Spoiler alert. I don't know if you do spoiler alerts in football, but regardless, Kansas City won. Speaking of Kansas City, well, there weren't really any big contracts with Kansas City this week, right? We talked about all their big contract guys. Their division rival, the Los Angeles Chargers, extended Keenan Allen. Kind of a weird situation because I don't know if I'd really want, if I'm Keenan Allen, to stay in LA. I guess if you know you're getting your money and you're getting an extension right now, kind of makes sense. Tre'Davious White got an extension. Cam Heyward got an extension. He's the defensive lineman on the Steelers. Tre'Davious White is the cornerback on the Bills. I mentioned Kareem Hunt. But the big ones I think that were important, right? I mean, like, we'll talk a little bit about, like, Hopkins got an extension, right? I talked about that actually on Brenda Facemere's show. If you tune into that on Thursday nights at 6 o'clock, I'm on that weekly. Zach Cunningham, a linebacker on the Texans, he got an extension. Budda Baker on the Arizona Cardinals got an extension. But the two big ones I think that are important, and because they show a change in leverage for the player, was Jalen Ramsey and DeAndre Hopkins got massive amounts of money. Like, because you traded really more Jalen Ramsey. Hopkins got an extension, and when you really look at the extension, it wasn't that much. But, like, dude, Ramsey got legit. Like, he is the highest paid corner in the NFL right now. Part of that extension, I really do think, is you traded 2 first-round picks. It's like the Laramie Tunsil thing. You have to sign this guy to an extension now. You have to make it look like it's good. So, Hopkins, you haven't even seen him play it down. They gave him a 2-year extension. They gave him more money. We hadn't talked about Deshaun Watson's extension. He's getting about $40 million a year now, so he's going to be the second highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Again, another Texan to talk about from tonight. He literally, honestly, there was a point where the Texans just looked like they gave up. Like, it looked like, you know what, we're behind. We can't do this anymore. It was really sad. I thought that was kind of a weird thing. It looked like they were almost in like a preseason game, and even at the end, like, they kneeled down. It looked like they really gave up at a certain point. Kareem Hunt we talked about. Tre White, very team-friendly deal, right? Very, and part of it was, I think it's like a $17 million a year deal, but it's, when you also add in the next 2 years on the rookie deal, it was it's very team friendly. So, a good deal for the Bills. I think it's a great idea if you're going to extend your own players. I'm a big fan of that. It kind of does, some of this gives you an idea of what's going to happen with Jamal Adams, because they just spent 2 first-round picks. Eventually, this guy's going to get the same kind of an extension that Jalen Ramsey and Laramie Tunsil did. That's what happens when you now just gave them so much leverage, because if they walk, you spent 2 first-round picks for no reason. So, Joe Mixon, right, running back for the Cincinnati Bengals, he just got an extension, $12 million a year. His contract looks relatively reasonable. I think that's actually not a bad payment to make to the guy. I know it's hard figuring out how much you should pay running backs, if there's an amount. Like, obviously, the Kareem Hunt deal is a little different of a story. He had, kind of an off-the-field thing a while back. He also grew up in Cleveland, so Kareem Hunt wanted to stick around for the next couple years and hopefully bring a championship to Cleveland. It's like that dream of, like, playing for your hometown team. Joe Mixon, not a hometown guy, but still very good dude, a very good player. Right now, there's also talks about Alvin Kamara potentially getting an extension. That hasn't happened yet, so we'll see what happens with that. It will probably be in between the Christian McCaffrey, Joe Mixon range, is what I've been hearing. The question comes down to, is there value in extending these running backs and paying these running backs? And I think when they add enough in the pass-catching game, there is, to an extent. Now, it depends on how loaded these contracts are. Like we saw with David Johnson, too, right? David Johnson was a good pass catcher, a good running back, but he got injured. Part of that's just injury. Todd Gurley's the same thing, but this could happen with a lot of players. I think really it's the evaluation of the position, what they are in your offense. Like Alvin Kamara is like a slot receiver, option back, also running back for that offense for the Saints. Joe Mixon makes that offensive line look better. He really, he does things that he's met in the backfield, and he just does things that, honestly, him and Melvin Gordon, I think, are underrated for that regard, is that they had bad offensive lines to begin their career, and they made them look like they did better with that. Like, they managed to still just find ways of getting into space and get moving and break tackles, and this is why I always think Melvin Gordon's a little underrated. I've always liked him as a player. So those were all the big contracts, right? I'll talk a little bit about this weekend. It's a big weekend. It's the first season, first time back. I talked a little bit about the fans being in the stadium for the Chiefs on, again, like face off of face mirror. We talked about that a little bit. There's going to be, there was fans in the stands for the Chiefs game. There's maybe a couple of other games where they will have fans. I think Jacksonville's going to have fans there. Going forward, they're looking into letting fans be in the stadiums in the next few weeks. So we're seeing what's going to happen here with these kind of test cases, if you will. We'll see how it goes. I think they want the money from the people being in the stands. Apparently, though, one of the big issues was that they were actually, they still had 1,000 tickets available to go to the Kansas City Chiefs game tonight. So part of it is people probably don't want to have to go, or they probably don't know they can get the tickets. Apparently, they were being sold under market value at some points. So very interesting thing to keep apprised of as far as the fans going into the stands kind of deal. Also on Thursdays, I might start doing it myself as well. Like, I'll preview all the games for everybody. On Thursdays, though, at 6 o'clock on Face Off with Face Mirror, I'll post it on the Draftvice. I'll post it everywhere. We will be doing picks for the games and who we think is going to be winning the games between all of us. Very good for, if you're a pick'em kind of person. So you can tune into that. I'm going to preview some of the games. I might do I'll do another episode. I'm going to release on Saturday. Next week it'll be on Fridays. But I'll release a Saturday episode talking about the preview to the games this coming week. And, so I'll do a breakdown of each of those games as we go into them, maybe the fantasy implications as well. And since, I mentioned we talk a little bit about fantasy, there's so everybody's done their draft at this point, right? Now we're past the day one game. And I've posted videos on this. Follow the TikTok, follow the YouTube. The YouTube's the biggest thing. Go subscribe to the YouTube and also the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But I talked about some players that people might want to go out and grab, right? For fantasy, if you felt like you didn't get enough of a particular position, specifically receiver and running back. Tight end and quarterback, there's usually depth everywhere, and you could stream guys, and it depends on the depth in your league. It depends on the type of league you're in. But in a standard 12-team PPR league, here's a few guys that you might want to look into. A couple of running backs right off the bat. I did the video on it yesterday. So I'll briefly touch on them. The big one is James Robinson, right? Jacksonville Jaguars. He's number one on the depth chart. He's I watched a little bit of his tape. I did not watch him a lot coming out. I did not watch any of him coming into the draft because I didn't even hear of this guy. So he's coming in. He's going to be potentially. I hear the starter Devine Ozigbo is on IR. Rockwell is on the COVID list, Rockwell Armistead, and also we know that Leonard Fournette is not on the team anymore. So really it leaves, Chris Thompson and our boy James Robinson. They are there, so I looked a little bit at the tape. He kind of reminds me of like a lanky Chris Carson, or a slightly slower Kerryon Johnson. If you just reduced Kerryon Johnson's speed by 15 to 20%, that's what he kind of reminds me of. So I don't think he's going to be bad. Apparently, they're saying he's picked up the offense really well. He was part of the decision to let go of Leonard Fournette. if this is the case, I mean, yes, they also signed Darren Ogunbowale, the former Tampa Bay Buccaneer, but he's also more of a special teams guy, third down role kind of guy, so he pretty much plays the same role as Chris Thompson anyway. Chris Thompson never stays healthy regardless. So we'll see what happens with those guys. I think, if you're going to try and jump on a guy early, get James Robinson, we'll see what happens. It's not exactly the fastest dude in the world, but, you don't have to necessarily be fast to be a good running back. Another couple of guys I feel like got kind of forgotten about. Jerick McKinnon of the San Francisco 49ers, right? Signed to a contract a couple years ago, tore his ACL, then wasn't healthy last year. Usually it takes, some guys, if they don't come back right away, it takes almost a year and a half to kind of come back from the ACL. Not everybody comes back in 11 months from the ACL. We got used to this from watching, Jamal Charles and Adrian Peterson, but then Jamal Charles tore his ACL again. So we've gotten used to seeing these guys bounce back from these hard injuries. So I think Jerick McKinnon might be the most interesting back in the San Francisco 49ers backfield because we don't know what he is right now still. I know what Mostert is. And listen, he's the fast. You got two fast running backs who I think Mostert's probably better than Tevin Coleman to an extent. I don't think it's going to be easy to figure out who's leading that backfield. Right now, it's a three-headed monster until we get clarity on that situation. I say just kind of take the cheapest guy you can get, and right now Jerick McKinnon is free, so free is very good. Then I also brought up Jamal Williams. He's a guy who people might be interested in grabbing because, Green Bay running back. I don't think A.J. Dillon gets a lot of play this year. He was drafted as a rookie coming in with, no camp, second-round pick, so high pedigree. But you're going to waste the life on the guys you have now, especially because Jamal Williams is a very good pass blocker. So, maybe you'll see a little bit coming out of him this year. In the offseason, after coming off this offseason, you'll see the usage. Maybe it'll be similar to the Aaron Jones situation. So if you need like a low-end RB2, RB3 kind of guy, Jamal Williams might be the guy to grab because, listen, if Aaron Jones goes down with an injury, now you have a partial starter, or a potential starter for your season. And also, again, he played enough snaps last year where he was at least semi-productive. A couple other names to drop. Joshua Kelly out of UCLA. I actually did look at his tape for the draft. I thought he was an interesting player coming out in the draft. I'll pull up. I did copy my notes onto this so I could look at it. Weirdly built frame. Not a very good pass blocker. He has good enough speed to be in the NFL. And there was a couple of good runs there. He looks like he's a better outside zone runner. If he gets it blocked up really well, he can probably be very useful. I can't tell if he has problems running on the interior or if it was the interior of the offensive line sometimes not getting pushed. Keep in mind, I'm not watching, all 22s all the time for some of these guys, so it's sometimes hard to gauge what you're, I do think he has very solid vision. He can plant his foot and go. These are all notes from the spring, so keep in mind, we're talking about me from 3 months ago writing all this. He also makes a handful of catches out of the backfield. It feels like all the Chargers running backs can. So Joshua Kelly, currently on the LA Chargers out of UCLA, he might be a solid guy to pick up. Solid athleticism, and he does have some long speed, so he can break one free. He might be, again, it feels like he's also the biggest back out of the three. So if you go ahead and grab him, you might have an opportunity there. Outside of him, are there any other ones? Bryce Love, you can maybe take a flyer on. J.D. Mckissick, weird because it was he's the top of the depth chart, but I don't think it means much. It sounds like everybody's saying Antonio Gibson's the starter there, even though J.D. Mckissick got the top billing on the depth chart. I don't know if there's much to believe with that. He's been more of a pass-catching back anyway, so if Washington was really using him like that, I don't know if I really believe it until I see it. But, speculative ads, deep leagues, go ahead and take a throw, a dart throw on it. Bryce Love's still kind of rehabbing from that ACL tear, but he should be coming back soon, probably be getting up to speed soon. he's an interesting one. He was fast when he was in college. He was a good one. I felt like he should have came out the year that he did have that good year, and he basically established why running back should declare as soon as they become eligible. But listen, I'm not going to go ahead and try to litigate his decisions. That's his choice. So those are some running backs, solid guys. None of them are going to blow you away. Maybe James Robinson gets some real push from that offensive line and becomes a solid starter for you. Probably like an RB2. I don't see him being like that game-breaking RB1 kind of guy. I think he will probably be somebody's RB2. If you went wide receiver heavy and you kind of screwed up your running back picks, or whatever you did, maybe you didn't know RB strategy. Not I, Rabbi, but still. So, again, that's probably the highest, of those guys. Robinson's probably the biggest one I'd probably take my flyer on. If Chris Thompson's available in your league, definitely go for Chris Thompson. Totally think that's a good idea. So, let's go receiver real quick. A couple of different guys. I also did a video on this. I did talk about Marquise Valdes-Scantling, receiver for the Green Bay Packers. He's kind of, very athletic, tall. Like, they want him to be, very good long speed. They want him to be something, right? They really do believe in this guy. That, and if his route running gets a little bit better, he probably can be. If there's a little bit of trust, if Rodgers manages to get trust with him, now in his third year, if he really understands the playbook now. Keep in mind, last year was his first year with the playbook. So maybe you don't always know exactly like the 18, how to run your route. Maybe you're running at 20 yards. We're supposed to be 18 yards. And it does sound like he's kind of at least getting the playbook down a little bit better now in his second year in LaFleur's offense. I do think they have a plan for him. I do think they want him to be something. Another guy who's another post-hype sleeper kind of guy is Corey Davis. He had, constantly, he's almost kind of like, the new Devontae Parker, where you just think it's going to be every year where he's going to pop and he just doesn't. And guess what? He is Devontae Parker's old quarterback. Not a good thing. But we will see. Maybe he does have his breakout season this year. We saw it. It was on tape. He's had good games. He's had good season. He's had good moments in seasons. He will take your lunch from you. He is a solid receiver as far as, at least he's had moments of being a solid receiver. But we don't know necessarily going forward what he's going to be for fantasy. But I think it's a guy who, again, top 10 pick in the NFL draft. I think he's a flyer. I think he's a starter on his own team. So if that's the case, he ends up, being good. If he's as good as he could be, it's a really good hit. So maybe check in on him. A couple of other dudes, Josh Reynolds, receiver on the LA Rams. The La Rams, if you know how it's called. La Ramza. So outside receiver, kind of replacing Brandon Cooks as the deep ball guy. Different body, different build, much taller and lankier, good speed, good deep speed. He's gonna get the deep balls here and there, and it won't matter. It doesn't matter if you've heard the 12 personnel versus 11 personnel thing. If they were moving more towards 12 personnel, I think he's still gonna be on the field. I think Cooper Kupp's gonna be the one who's gonna sacrifice on that. After Josh Reynolds, I also thought about Laviska Shenault, wide receiver out of Jacksonville. He, the rookie wide receiver, but he kind of has some Sami Watkins to his game. So I wouldn't be shocked if, we hear about him, really coming forth, replacing where D. Westbrook is on the depth chart. He runs like a running back. So I want to see him utilized. I want to see what they can get out of him. He had an injury issue. That's why he kind of fell to the second round this year in the draft. So I like him. Who else? Brian Edwards, another guy, outside receiver. You probably were hearing about Henry Ruggs in his draft stock, and he probably went in your league. But Brian Edwards might be available. Solid. We'll see what he's going to do as a rookie. But again, Tyrell Williams isn't there. They need somebody to replace him. He's probably going to play the X in that offense, the split end. I don't know if that means he can actually do it. I don't know if that means he'll be effective at it. Hunter Renfro, second-year guy, might be available in your league. Kind of a slot guy, kind of a Cole Beasley type. but, considering Derek Carr's become a little bit of a check down Charlie over the years, he might be able to get you at least a floor as far as your receiving goes. Paris Campbell, I didn't even talk about this guy in the video because I really didn't feel like it was needed. But, not for nothing, this guy was a little electric when he was at college. Like, he was getting a lot of the crossing routes, the slot routes. If they utilize him like that with the Colts, I could see there being potential for him to kind of blow up, being the other receiver outside of T.Y. Hilton. Also they drafted Michael Pittman. But, like, there's, there's some draft value, draft stock invested into him. And that's kind of most of my list for right now for these guys. As far as receiver goes, if you missed out on tight end, maybe go ahead and grab Greg Olsen if he's available in your league. Jack Doyle, they're playing the the Colts are playing the Jags. There's a lot of reports of Phillip Rivers targeting the tight ends. His arm's not as what it used to be, so maybe he's going to focus on Jack Doyle and Trey Burton and the running backs. And keep in mind, Trey Burton might not even be playing, so you might get some real value out of a Jack Doyle pickup and playing him the first week, even if you're just streaming him the first week. Like I said before, Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen's probably going to be the third target in that offense. He could be that kind of like guy you drafted the last round or got in free agency, and he ends up actually performing for you as a tight end. That's kind of a rarity. Dallas Goddard might be available in some leagues. I actually think that would be a good pickup for a lot of people. He's just going to get you a floor. He's not going to get you a ceiling. So just keep in mind with that. And then outside of that, listen, fantasy's here. Football is here. We have football. It tastes so good. It's right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave you with what I've just discussed with you. Tune into the podcast. You can find the podcast at Draftvice on Twitter, at Draftvice_football on Instagram. You can follow me at BROJO. Death is in the end of life. Punch like a delicious drink you drink when you're out at parties. Sometimes it gets spiked. Don't spike punch and don't spike drinks. Let people kind of do it on their own. But regardless, and you can follow me. Now follow, like, subscribe the videos. Go to the YouTube. Subscribe to the videos, subscribe to the podcast, and I'm going to release a Saturday episode. It might not get a lot of listens, but I'm going to release a Saturday episode this week, and then starting next week, I will promise to actually do daily freaking episodes, even if it kills me. So, yes, we are here. Football is here. I love it. We are almost, it's here. And tune in next time for when I try to take over the world using my banana
I woke up this morning, I was feeling pretty dangerous. I love the past, I love the future.